Every great city once had them, cathedral-sized halls of iron and glass where the day began before dawn. London's Covent Garden fed a metropolis by 1830. Paris built Les Halles across 10 glass pavilions in the 1850s. Cleveland's West Side Market opened in 1912 with a 137-foot clock tower. For a century, they were the beating stomach of urban life. Then, within a single generation, most simply disappeared. What killed a building type that had survived for 800 years? To understand what was lost, you have to go back to what came before it, and what came before it was chaos. The market hall was born from a problem no medieval town could ignore: the open street where food was sold under no rules at all. That street was a mess. Open-air markets bred fraud, spoilage, and congestion. A butcher could shave his scales. A grain seller could hide rot beneath fresh sacks. Meat sat in the sun. Dust blew across the bread, and carts jammed the narrow lanes until nothing could move. Buyers had no protection. So the authorities did something radical for the 12th and 13th centuries. They pulled the market indoors. England's earliest covered market halls date to that period, and their purpose was control, not comfort. The market at Chichester was granted its charter in 1204. The town of Ludlow, in Shropshire, built its trading hall on land held by the Crown, and the pattern spread through more than 1,000 English market towns by 1300. Under one roof, town officials could regulate weights, measures, and prices. A single set of scales, checked by the town, meant a customer could trust what a pound actually weighed. The market hall was medieval consumer protection cast in timber and stone. That impulse to control never went away, but the scale of the building changed. 7 centuries after those first modest English halls, the 19th century turned the humble covered market into something monumental. The tools were new, and the ambition enormous. The tools were cast iron and plate glass. Together they could do something no stone builder had managed: span vast interior spaces with almost no columns in the way. Suddenly, a market floor could be flooded with daylight and open from wall to wall, room enough for hundreds of stalls under a single soaring canopy. The precedent was Joseph Paxton's Crystal Palace, built in London for the Great Exhibition of 1851, a structure of nearly 300,000 panes of glass raised in months, not years. Engineers took the lesson straight to the food trade, where a roof of glass over an iron skeleton could shelter a wholesale floor the size of a village square. Paris built the masterpiece. Between 1852 and 1870, architect Victor Baltard raised Les Halles, a complex of iron and glass pavilions in the heart of the city. Baltard's first design, in stone, was rejected by Napoleon III, who reportedly demanded iron, nothing but iron, and the architect returned with pavilions of riveted metal that the emperor approved. It was a demonstration of what industry could do to feed a capital. The same logic spread south, where Barcelona formalized its own great market, the Mercat de la Boqueria, in 1840, giving permanent order to a trading spot that had bustled for centuries. With the technology proven, these halls became statements. If Paris could raise iron temples to feed its people, every ambitious city wanted one, and so began a quiet competition in stone, glass, and civic pride. Budapest answered in style. Its great market hall opened in 1897, sprawling across roughly 10,000 square meters of trading floor, its steel frame supplied by the Eiffel Company, and its roof tiled in the colored Zizolnay ceramics of the Hungarian factory at Pécs. On opening day, the mayor, Carolee Rath, led the ceremony beneath vaults lit by newly installed electric lamps. Across the Atlantic, Cleveland matched the mood in 1912, spending about $680,000 to build its West Side market, crowned by that 137-foot clock tower you could see from blocks away. The architects, Benes and Hesse, roofed the main hall in a Guastavino tile vault soaring 44 feet, and on its first morning the market opened with roughly 100 vendors selling beneath it. But these buildings were not only about pride. They were about public health, the real argument that loosened city purse strings. A covered hall protected produce from rain, dust, and the brutal summer heat that turned fresh food dangerous within hours. Clean food under a clean roof was a promise a city could make to its citizens, and the grand halls made that promise visible. That promise depended on more than a roof. It depended on a whole machinery of trust and supply running beneath the iron canopy, and that machinery reached far past the city walls, out into the countryside where the food actually grew. Les Halles was the beating center of that machinery. It handled the wholesale food supply for the entire city, the single point where the harvests of the French countryside met the appetite of the capital. At its peak, the market moved thousands of tons of food a day, and its labor had its own hierarchy. The licensed porters, called the forts de Halles, wore numbered brass badges and were the only men permitted to carry goods across the floor. Before dawn, carts rolled in, loaded with vegetables, fish, cheese, and meat, and by morning that food had fanned out across every neighborhood in Paris. The writer Émile Zola understood what he was looking at. In his 1873 novel, he called Les Halles the belly of Paris, and the phrase stuck because it was true. Zola spent weeks walking the pavilions at 4 in the morning, filling notebooks with the names of fish and the shouts of the sellers, and the book, Le Ventre de Paris, was the third in his 20-volume Rougon-Macquart series. This was not a shop. It was an organ, digesting the produce of a nation and feeding it into millions of mouths. And it ran on rules, the same instinct for control that had built those first medieval halls. Stalls were licensed. Traders were regulated. Market officials inspected the goods daily, checking that the fish was fresh and the scales honest. The hall connected a farmer with soil under his fingernails directly to a city family's dinner table, under supervision every single day. For a century, that system looked permanent, too big and central to imagine gone. And yet the thing that would unravel it was already humming to life in kitchens and warehouses, and it made almost no noise at all. That quiet killer was mechanical refrigeration. It did not attack the market hall directly. It simply removed the reason the hall had to exist. The entire logic of the daily market rested on one hard fact. Food spoiled fast, so you bought it the day you ate it. Refrigeration broke that fact in half. In the United States, home refrigerators spread rapidly through the 1920s and 1930s, moving from luxury to ordinary appliance in barely a generation. General Electric's monitor top, launched in 1927, sold more than 1 million units within a few years, and by 1944, roughly 85% of American households owned a refrigerator, up from almost none in 1920. Cold storage meant food no longer had to be purchased and consumed on the same day. A family could keep milk, meat, and vegetables fresh for days. And so the rhythm of urban life shifted. The daily trip to the market, that ancient ritual before dawn, began to fade. By the middle of the 20th century, shopping had become a weekly errand, not a daily one. The hall that had thrived on people coming every morning suddenly saw them only once a week. Refrigeration cooled the demand for daily shopping. But the second blow struck the very geography of the market, the reason a single central building had made sense. That blow came on rubber tires. The delivery truck destroyed the logic of one central location. Through the 1920s and 1930s, motor trucks replaced the horse and cart, and with them came a new freedom. In 1919, the United States counted around 1 million registered trucks. By 1929, that figure had climbed past 3.5 million. Goods no longer had to converge on one great haul in the middle of the city and then be carried out again. Instead, a truck could deliver produce directly to dispersed neighborhood shops, dropping crates at 100 small stores across the city. The whole point of the central hall, the gathering, the sorting, the single meeting place, started to look unnecessary. Worse, it started to look like a problem. Because that concentration of carts, trucks, and buyers created gridlock. A central wholesale hall in a dense city core became a knot of traffic that choked the streets around it every morning. What had once been a marvel of efficiency was now a bottleneck, and cities began to see the Great Hall not as a jewel, but as an obstruction. So refrigeration had freed the shopper from daily trips, and the truck had freed the goods from the central location. What was still missing was a single place that could gather all of it back together on new terms, and in America, that place arrived with fluorescent lights and a parking lot. That place was the supermarket, and it offered everything the market hall did, only better suited to the new world. In 1916, a store called Piggly Wiggly introduced self-service groceries, letting customers pick items off the shelf themselves instead of asking a clerk behind a counter. Its founder, Clarence Saunders, opened that first store on Jefferson Avenue in Memphis and patented the turnstile and aisle layout the following year. It was a small idea with vast consequences. Then came scale. In 1930, King Cullen opened, often called the first true supermarket, combining everything under one climate-controlled roof with room to park your car outside. Its founder, Michael Cullen, set up shop in a former garage in Queens, New York, and advertised himself as the world's greatest price wrecker. By 1936, he ran 17 stores. One stop replaced the old routine of visiting a separate butcher, greengrocer, and fishmonger, each with its own line and stall. The market hall had invented that variety, the idea that you could get everything in one building. The supermarket took the idea, added refrigeration, air conditioning, and a parking lot, and stripped away the crowds and early hours. It was the hall's own promise, repackaged for the age of the automobile. And the automobile did not just change how people shopped, it changed where they lived. And that final shift pulled the ground out from under the downtown hall for good. After the Second World War, suburbanization surged across both the United States and Europe. In America, the Levittown developments on Long Island, begun in 1947, put up more than 17,000 near-identical houses, and federal highway spending after the 1956 Interstate Act carved fast roads out to the edges of every city. Families left the dense city core for houses on the edge of town and took their spending with them. The old downtown market district, which had depended on customers who lived within walking distance, watched its neighborhood empty out. Car ownership sealed the shift. Once a family had a car, a distant supermarket with a big parking lot was more convenient than a crowded downtown hall with nowhere to leave the vehicle. The market district lost its captive walking customers, the people who had shopped there simply because it was near. Near no longer mattered. So the forces had gathered: refrigeration, the truck, the supermarket, the suburb. Each one alone might have been survivable. Together they were a verdict. And that verdict was about to be delivered on the most famous market hall on the planet. Les Halles was to be gutted. In 1969, the wholesale market that had fed the city for over a century was moved out to Runge's, a modern facility on the outskirts where trucks could come and go without strangling the ancient streets. Runge's was built beside Orly Airport on some 230 hectares and remains the largest fresh food market in the world. The heart of Paris had, in an afternoon, lost its stomach. Then came the wrecking crews. Between 1971 and 1973, Baltard's iron pavilions, those glass halls Zola had immortalized, were torn down. The demolition became a global scandal, a symbol of a city destroying its own soul in the name of progress. A single pavilion was saved and re-erected at Nogent-sur-Marne, where it still stands as a lonely fragment of the whole. What replaced them made the loss sting even more. On the site of the great iron cathedral of food rose the Forum des Halles, an underground shopping complex wrapped around a road interchange. The belly of Paris had become a traffic junction with a mall inside it. If it could happen to Les Halles, it could happen anywhere. And it did happen almost everywhere. The fall of Les Halles was the most famous casualty, but one of hundreds, as wrecking balls swung through market halls across 2 continents. Through the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s, urban renewal became the watchword, and the old covered markets were prime targets. Across the United States and Europe, hall after hall was demolished. The sites were paved into highways, flattened into parking lots, or built over with office towers. Buildings that had regulated food for 800 years were reclassified as blight. But every scandal breeds a reaction, and this one bred a movement. Preservation campaigns formed in cities partly in direct response to these losses, to the sight of beloved landmarks reduced to rubble for a parking garage. The demolition of the old market halls helped teach a generation that progress could be a form of vandalism. That instinct to preserve arrived too late for most halls. But for a lucky handful, it arrived just in time, and those survivors found they could go on living by becoming something new. If they could no longer be the city's warehouse, they could become its stage. Barcelona's Boqueria led that transformation. Once the working wholesale heart of the city's food trade, it reinvented itself as a tourist landmark, drawing millions of visitors every year who come as much to photograph the pyramids of fruit and the ranks of hanging ham as to buy their dinner. Budapest's Great Market Hall did the same, only more openly. Under that grand 19th century roof, real produce stalls now sit beside souvenir sellers offering paprika, embroidery, and fridge magnets. It feeds locals on the ground floor and tourists on the balcony. London's Borough Market went the gourmet route, reinventing itself as a destination for artisan cheese, rare coffee, and expensive street food, a place people travel across the city to visit because they want to. So some halls survived by becoming spectacles. Others survived by keeping only their skin, the beautiful iron and glass shell, while their entire purpose was scooped out and replaced. Covent Garden is the clearest example. In 1974, its fruit and vegetable trading ceased entirely, moving out just as the Paris market had. The trade shifted to a new site at 9 Elms, south of the river, and for a time the empty central building was itself threatened with demolition before public protest saved it. But the building was not destroyed. It was reborn as a shopping arcade, a place of boutiques and street performers where produce carts once rumbled at dawn. That pattern repeated across countless cities. Many former market halls now house upscale food hall dining concepts, curated collections of restaurants and bars beneath the historic roof. The iron and glass are lovingly preserved, cleaned and lit and admired, while the function they were built for has vanished. The shell remembers the market. The building no longer is one. And yet, to end on the museum pieces and the food courts would miss the stubborn exceptions, the halls that never surrendered, because a few are still doing exactly what they were built to do. Cleveland's West Side Market is the proof. More than 110 years after it opened beneath that 137-foot clock tower, it still operates as a working market, feeding real neighborhoods with real produce and real meat from real vendors. It is not nostalgia. It is a functioning organ of its city. Across Europe, too, some cities retain functioning daily produce markets under their historic roofs, places where locals still buy their vegetables in the morning as their grandparents did. And where these halls survive, it is often because community campaigns fought to keep them in active use, refusing to let them become either rubble or theme parks. The model never fully died. It just grew rare. So when we stand in one of these buildings today, whether a working market, a gourmet destination, or a boutique arcade, we are looking at the survivor of an extraordinary collapse. The question that opened this film has an answer, and it is not really about buildings at all. It is about the machines that changed how we live. Refrigeration, trucks, supermarkets, and suburbs did not conspire. They simply arrived, each solving a problem, and together they dismantled the deepest rhythm of urban life, the daily walk to buy food before it spoiled. An 800-year-old building type, one that had outlasted plagues, wars, and revolutions, declined within roughly a single human generation. What remains is largely nostalgia, tourism, and adaptive reuse. Technologie emptied, the C80's belly. The market hall did not fail. The city around it changed until it no longer needed one, and the grandest food temples ever built became beautiful answers to a question no one was asking anymore. If you enjoyed walking these vanished halls with us, consider subscribing so you never miss the next lore film.